WhatsApp users really be worried about the new privacy changes? The smartphone app has postponed its deadline of the controversial privacy policy changes to May the 15th. That's after backlash from users that saw millions flocking to rival apps like Signal and Telegram. Well, let's get more details on this. Joining us now live from Geneva in Switzerland is lead software developer Nicholas Burke. Nicholas, good morning, and thank you very much for your time here on eNCA in Johannesburg. There are so many issues that have come up around this WhatsApp thing until last week when they were forced. I mean, they were literally forced to extend or postpone the deadline from February to May, despite what their statement says. But some people, including here in South Africa, some commentators have somehow been downplaying this privacy issue. I hold a different view. I think it's a serious matter. Do you share that?
Yes, thank you for inviting me. Yes, it is a serious matter. Their new privacy policy goes into more detail as to what they recuperate, and this small push to transparency actually unveils a pretty big problem. They retrieve a lot of service-related data, so how you use the app personally. They also retrieve a lot of hardware data, so your IP addresses, how often and how long you use the app. And finally, they also now recuperate Facebook application identifiers, which allows them to basically identify what Facebook users use WhatsApp or Instagram and kind of have an idea of the whole ecosystem.
And I also understand, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not a lawyer and I'm not an IT specialist or software developer like you. I also understand that they can also access details of my contacts when this privacy thing starts without them knowing or me knowing, and I find that to be a problem.
Yes. So to be clear, them having access to contacts doesn't mean that they have access to what you communicate. WhatsApp is end-to-end encrypted. But they do have access to your entire contact sheet. So that means that at any time, instead of like they used to, getting the name of the people that are in your contact sheet and then their phone number, they now potentially have access to all the email addresses and maybe the notes or, birthdays that you write in there. Now that is a pretty big issue in of itself, but they also have a second line, which is basically that they assume, without asking you, without requiring your informed consent, that you have the authorization to share that contact info, which as a particular isn't that much of an issue, but as a business, if you run a business via WhatsApp, you might get into hot water for.
Because the person whose information you've sort of passed on indirectly was not authorized, was without their permission, you could end up being sued yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now the other issue that has come up here is how safe are the other platforms? If WhatsApp's privacy is an issue, then won't there be similar issues with Telegram? Who owns Telegram? And some people, including the likes of billionaire Elon Musk, he's tweeted one word a few weeks ago, the other day, said Signal. As soon as this was announced, he's moving to Signal. And who owns Signal? And I mean, these questions come up now.
Yes, those are very good questions, very legitimate questions. Signal itself is a nonprofit that has its main, is based in the U.S., but it's a 501c3 nonprofit, so it only works off of donations, and its privacy policy is basically that they won't be selling your data for business perspectives because they can't. They're not allowed to as a nonprofit. The same is more or less the case for Telegram. And both of them have enough encryption for it to be considered safe. Typically, Signal, the Signal Foundation developed the Signal Protocol, which is the encryption system on which WhatsApp is based off of. Telegram uses its own encryption protocol called MT-Proto, which also encrypts users' data. But that means that, for example, Signal doesn't have access to the content of what you write. So if you potentially, not that I recommend doing this, send the password via Signal, they wouldn't be able to see it. In Telegram, the issue is a little bit different because their encryption scheme isn't end-to-end encrypted. On the servers of Telegram, the data is clear text, more or less.
So what choices do we have? I'm just wondering where you are in Switzerland, for example, in Europe, because there's also this European question that WhatsApp keeps on referring to. I don't know what that's all about. It looks like the rest of us in the world, like here in Africa, are excluded for something or treated differently. What can one do now? I mean, they've been forced to extend the deadline. I mean, they have been forced, no matter what they say, to extend the deadline to May. What can we be doing then?
So, to be fair to the whole European situation, so Europe kind of has this thing called GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, in which case certain enterprises aren't allowed to do the same things with users' data as everywhere else in the world. California has the same thing, and since a short while ago, South Africa does as well. The POPIA Act, so the Protection of Personal Information Act, does also kind of come into this rule set. But that doesn't exactly seem to affect the data that is then transmitted by WhatsApp to Facebook, because WhatsApp is owned by Facebook.
Now,
the alternative.
The alternative, yeah, the alternative.
So the few alternatives people have are like we talked about. There's Telegram and Signal. Signal being the one of the two that is end-to-end encrypted. For some people that might want to pay a little bit, like under $1 a month, the Swiss app Threema is also an option, but then again, it's not free. Also, you have Wire, which is very well known, also Swiss. You have the Matrix network, which uses the Write client or the Element client now, which is also encrypted. You have a ton of alternatives, but the issue is getting other people onto those alternatives.
You got 1 billion users of WhatsApp in the world. They claim they were doing this for business. Of course, it's all about profits because Facebook is a listed company. We all know that Mark Zuckerberg is chasing more and more profits. Short of doing that, if you can't, and you are really, your business model needs WhatsApp, is there a way you could try and mitigate in terms of privacy at all? Or you are just open to Facebook harvesting whatever information as and when they want without you knowing it come May?
To be clear, in your phone, when you go to the settings, you can block certain applications from accessing potentially like your contact list. This has two effects. One, it becomes harder to use these applications. For example, if you do this for WhatsApp, and WhatsApp you can't necessarily like find a contact by a phone number and then write a message or find a name for that contact. You would need to actually know their phone number, have it on a piece of paper, type it in, and then type the message and know exactly who it's for. So it's possible, but it makes life harder, much harder.
What are you going to do?
So I have been using Telegram for my day-to-day life. And I've been using Signal as a method of communication with other people in the IT and information security industry. So it's not going to be that hard for me to migrate off of it. Where I'm going to have issues, it's with family and other students and academic members of academia.
Who are on WhatsApp. Yeah, it's always a challenging one. Like us here in media organization, our producers, our editors, we are all on WhatsApp groups. We're going to be having an interesting decision to make. Thank you very much. That's Nicholas Burke, live to us from Geneva, Switzerland. He's, of course, a software development. He's in the information systems. I mean, it is really a tough one for many of us. I mean, 1 billion users of WhatsApp, but they cannot just arrogantly just let our privacy be treated the way they've been doing. And they've been gladly, I say, forced to postpone this to May. No matter what they say, they're going to have to review, and they have to respect our privacy. The fact that we're consumers of their platform does not make us cannon fodder for unconstitutional behavior.